I accidentally wrote on here where I stopped in my last class, so just ignore that. Just write something else there, but just ignore the minor scribble. I didn't have time to drop it. I think my colleague said that. I brought up the syllabus to show you. We're going to finish talking about ethics today, and we'll move into marketing research, and hopefully I'll have time to show you a video that integrates. One of the things that I like to point out is that we talk about these topics as though they are individual silos, but marketing, because it is the only fully integrated function of the firm, requires that you integrate all of this stuff. And so I hope to have time to watch a video that shows how ethics and ethical issues can integrate with marketing research, because you're going to have to integrate all of these ideas together in a way that makes sense. And it's going to be useful for you as you go into business to start thinking about how this stuff all fits together. One of the reasons I think I was terribly successful as an undergraduate student was not because I was all that bright, but because I sort of understood how all of these things that we taught on a college campus came together and interplayed and worked together, and I could make these kinds of connections. So I hope we get to that video, but if not, we will have the first exam on a week, or not a week from today. It'll be on Tuesday, so the next class period will cover chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. So I show that to you, and I show you here. You're going to have to go down to load more in the first module because there's so many files and so many links there. So if you click load more, there are 2 practice exams on here. The first one is this one, and I lost the key to it. The second one I put up there because it does have the key. What I would do if I were you, which you won't do, is I would not look at the key and go through. This is what you'll probably do. You'll go through the key and you'll circle the right answers, and then you'll try to back into those answers. Try to figure out why that's the right answer. If I were you, I would work the exam and then look at the answers, see where you got it wrong, and try to figure out why the answers are right. The way the exams work in here, because we want you to integrate this stuff, is it's not just about identifying terms, it's about being able to use them. So for example, it's going to be not just the best, it's not just the right answer, but the best answer in the question. So for example, on the first exam that I wrote years ago, and I've used this question since, which of the following statements about marketing is the most accurate? Statement A. Marketing is the only fully integrated function of the firm. That's correct. Statement, and so you just circle answer A, mark answer A. Answer B. Marketing is a pervasive social activity. I told you that's part of my definition. That's correct. Answer C. Unless you can have taken a course in marketing, you know nothing about that. That's the one that's not correct. I told you that if you walked into this class, you're already an expert in marketing. You just didn't know it. Answer D. Marketing is a pervasive social activity and the only fully integrated function of the firm. That's better than A and B and not C, right? E. Marketing is the only fully integrated function of the firm. It is a pervasive social activity. Businesses, organizations, and individuals all use marketing all the time. That would be the best answer. So you have to read all of the answers and approach the exam that way. So that's my advice to you on the exam. We need to finish talking about ethics. We've talked about the challenges to ethics. So let's talk about the valid ethical theories. What makes a theory valid? Well, unlike the invalid challenges, which are based on emotion, the valid theories are not based on emotion. They're based on reason, and they don't allow for exceptionalism, which means that we can derive universal rules of behavior from them. Whereas subjectivism, you can never derive a universal rule because you're saying it's just up to me. Or cultural relativism, you can't derive a universal rule because you're saying it's culturally specific, and cultures vary. A psychological egoist would say it's all deterministic, and so it's a futile attempt anyway. So they're based on emotion, they allow for exceptionalism, they're not based on reason. So the valid ethical theories are based on reason. They're not emotive because they're based on reason, or rational analysis of alternatives, and they allow for no exceptions. Now that's not to say that there aren't problems with each of these. Again, because I had some people in my class this morning. I'm going to try and find different examples for you so that you don't hear the same examples twice. But there are problems. That's not the issue. There are things that we can think about. I have not heard a completely satisfactory ethical theory that doesn't have some problems. But because they at least meet these three criteria, philosophers have decided that these are the valid theories. So what are they? The one that's the oldest you get from the first fully worked out system of philosophy that we know about, probably. There are hints of philosophy and pre-philosophical thought and things like the Upanishads. In the Hebrew Bible, you see the beginnings of philosophical thought and the question of knowledge, which begins in the biblical story in Genesis in the Garden of Good and Evil, and the eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. But Plato's Republic is really the first cogent that we have, that we know about. There may have been one before this that answers these three questions, but it's the first that we have a full system worked out and that we've been able to find. In that, you have a system of government that Socrates at the end is forced to recognize that it will probably never come into existence, but he says that's not the point. The point is not of philosophy is not to tell you what actually is going on out there. It's to tell you what the best is that we can become. And as we think about the challenges to these valid ethical theories, I think you should think about that. What is the best that we can become? And maybe the third theory approaches that. So what are the valid ethical theories? Well, there's the teleological theory, which is the one that students like the most in business courses because you are most familiar with this from economics. Economists talk about the maximization of utility in the business world or in an economy. And what does that mean? Well, you all know what this means intuitively. It's you should get the most bang for your buck. When you go shopping, you want to stretch your dollar as far as you can to get the most value for your money, for what you want, based on your goals and aspirations. In a society, we think about this as the allocation of goods, and the most efficient allocation of those goods and services is by the free hand of the market, that it will allow us to allocate goods and services to those who most value them, based on what they're willing to pay for them. Now, there are problems with this in an economic sense. We generally think that capitalism is the best form of economy. But there are failures in the market. There are market failures, and there are what we call externalities that we don't always occur and we don't always take into account. And that can be a problem from a philosophical standpoint as well. Then, in response to utilitarianism, there's duty ethics, or deontological ethics, and then virtue ethics. So teleological ethics, which focuses on the telos, this is from the Greek word for end, telo, focuses not in economic terms, in terms of monetary value, but maximization of happiness. What's going to provide the greatest happiness for the most number of people? Now, how are we going to do this? Well, there are two forms. The purest form is called act utilitarianism, which says that in every interaction with other people, you need to calculate what is going to produce the overall greatest amount of good for everybody involved, and then act in such a way as to bring about that greatest overall happiness. Now that sounds fairly straightforward, doesn't it? Let's take a very simple, basic example. I have a car to sell, and you need a car. So what I want is I want to get as much money for the car as I can, and you want to do what? Pay as little as possible. So through the process of negotiation, so I'll list my car, let's say, today I'm driving my mother's car, which is why I have the duck that sticks out. It used to be a frog. My aunt has a Honda as well, and she comes over to my mother's house, and she picks up my mother's keys. And so my mother puts these things on her keychain so that Mona won't pick up her keys, mistaking them for hers when she leaves. So she had a frog, Kermit the Frog, so I had a frog hanging out of my pocket. So I'm using my mother's car. But my normal car, because my mother had to pick up stuff today, is a Dodge Ram 3500. Let's say I listed for $12,000. That'd be a good price. It's a 2015 model, bought it new. That'd be a really good price for it. But you don't want to pay that much, so you're going to say $8,000. And I say $11,000. You say 10, and I say sold. Now I've got $10,000 that I can then use to go do something else that I want, and you've got a car. And we maximize, we both are better off as a result of that transaction. Well, in a very straightforward world, that works, doesn't it? If we just have two parties that we're thinking about, it's easy to think about what's going to maximize the overall happiness. But let's think about a more complex world, where you go beyond two parties. Henry Ford develops the first affordable, mass-produced automobile in the world, the Model T. And as a result of that, he really gets the auto industry started. Then other people come along, Dodge, and we now have almost everybody has a car. How many of you have a car? Everybody in here should have a car. If I ask this question in New York City, a lot of people would say that they don't have cars. Why? You take taxi, you use they have great public transit in New York City. You can walk, you can take the subway, you've got taxis. It's expensive. When my brother lived in New York, he had an apartment in New York City. He lived actually in Saratoga Springs most of the time, but his company paid for him to have an apartment when he needed to go meet clients in New York City. The parking space rent was more than my house payment at one point in time for parking for a month in New York City. So lots of people don't have cars. Was it a good thing that Henry Ford introduced us all to the automobile? Yes? You're shaking your heads, yes? Yes. How many thousands of people have died as a result of automobile accidents? Were any of those people that died brilliant and maybe had the cure for cancer in their brain if they had lived? Maybe. What else has happened as a result of automobiles and this huge amount that we have?
Pollution.
What?
Pollution.
Pollution, absolutely. We are now doing irreparable harm to our planet and maybe future generations. Is it conceivable that we may make the planet uninhabitable as a result of the pollution that we've created from this invention? This really starts the industrial Henry Ford. It's not just the automobile. What all happened as a result of his innovation? He didn't invent the assembly line, but he improved upon it. He made it the moving assembly line, which means that we can mass produce, and you can apply this principle to all kinds of other things, and we're now mass producing all sorts of stuff that ends up where? It ends up in landfills, and it's doing enormous degradation to our environment. They put all this stuff into a landfill, and they fill it up, and how many of you have seen these things where they have, if you go out a few miles east of like Moore, there's what used to be the Oklahoma City landfill, and it's this huge mound, and they have to have all of these pipes out of it to burp it, and it's releasing methane gas. As a result of that, not only are we doing damage to our environment, but we're doing damage to our health. What has happened as a result of the automobile and the pollution that we encumber in places like Oklahoma City and Los Angeles, where it's even worse? there are far more respiratory problems overall that people have from pollution. Lung cancer increases. There are people that are dying who have never smoked because the air that they're breathing is so dirty and polluted in places like Beijing, and it used to be in Los Angeles. I used to sit on the board of directors for the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments. And one of the things that we were constantly worried about were EPA regulations that monitored air quality standards. And we were constantly, because if you didn't monitor them, you ran the risk of losing federal highway funds. And in the summertime, we have frontal passage on average every 3 days in Oklahoma. In the winter, that frontal passage generally is from north to south as cold fronts come in. And in the summer, it's from south to north as warm air in the Gulf pushes north. What sits 250 miles to the south? So we were constantly busting our air quality standards in Oklahoma City, and it wasn't really as a result of the pollution that we were creating. What sits 250 miles to the south of us? Dallas. And when we would have that frontal passage, it would raise the ozone level in Oklahoma City to dangerous levels. And we were producing these ads that told you how to reduce these, like don't fuel it during the day, fill up your car at night. Don't cut your grass and use lawnmowers on days that we had ozone alerts. Try to commute with somebody else. Would you say that Henry Ford is a bad man? Because we now have all of these problems that are a result of his innovation. Was it reasonably foreseeable that he know about ozone pollution at the time he invented the Model T? You see, how reasonably foreseeable is it? Overall, and how do you measure that? Are we happier now as a result of all of us having a car? Or are we less happy? How do you measure? One of the things that people think about is they want to go back to the good old days, and maybe the good old days weren't so good, when life was simpler. You had 40 acres of mule. Going to church was a big deal. You only had one nice pair of clothing. I mean, we have so much stuff that we want, and are we happier? Are we happier as a result of having these devices than we were before? You can't fathom that people are having problems. They're having psychological problems as a result of this device. How many of you have experienced this phenomenon where you get they're called phantom vibrations from your phone? You think you're so eager to get that next, you're so addicted to get that next text message that you feel like your phone's gone off and you check it. How many of you have had this happen? I've had it happen. I've had phantom. And when it doesn't, when it turns out it was a false alarm, it was just your psyche playing a trick on you, you're disappointed. Nobody loves me. Was it reasonably foreseeable that the automobile led to this? I mean, these are produced on assembly lines that are in the direct patrimony of Henry Ford. Is that fair? Would it be fair to say you're a bad man? Or how do we even judge that? If we take the simple example of my selling a car, we're both happier. But that's two people. We now have 7 billion that live on the planet. How do you measure that? A second form of utilitarianism attempts to deal with this. It's called rule utilitarianism. And it says, well, what we need to do is we need to come up with rules that in the aggregate produce the overall greatest happiness. So what we'll do is we'll come up with pollution standards, and we'll engage in rulemaking to try to lower the pollution overall. We'll come up with greater and stricter miles per gallon requirements that cars have to have. And we'll try and do it that way. The problem with that is that every time you formulate a rule, what happens? Something doesn't fit. You have to continually, so you have to have perpetual reform of the rule. In response to that, the antithesis, another problem is that not everything is that the means justify the end, and this video doesn't work anymore. It talks about the chocolate industry. A small number of people in the world are enslaved to this day to produce chocolate. A lot of the world's chocolate is not ethically sourced. How many of you have seen the movie Blood Diamonds? Didn't it have Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie? The skinny little kid? Who's not so skinny? Diamonds are not ethically sourced in many instances. Now you can buy, if you want to buy your fiancé a diamond engagement ring, you can buy ethically sourced diamonds where they don't engage in sort of these abhorrent practices. But chocolate is still one of these things that's largely produced by slave labor. A small number of people are enslaved, and aren't we all so much happier as a result of the fact that we get our Kit Kat bars and our Snickers? We're coming up on one of the biggest chocolate buying days in the country, Valentine's Day. And aren't we just all so much happier that we can give our insignificant other a nice box of chocolates? Because a small number of people are enslaved. Well, a lot of us would say, no, that's still wrong. Even though it's a small number of people for overall greater happiness, that means don't justify the ends. And we can't come up with rules that fit every single thing. So the antithesis would be duty ethics. If you think about this in Hegelian terms. So duty ethics, what do duty ethicists say? Well, like utilitarianism, it comes in two forms. The oldest form is called religious absolutism. Now, how are we going to determine what the duties are for a religious absolutist? Well, you're going to do what? Where are you going to turn to find out what the duties are? You're going to turn to the book. You said the what? The Bible. Yeah, in this country, it would be the Bible. Because we're overwhelmingly what in this country? Christian nation. If you were someplace else, you would turn to what? If you were in Iran, you would turn to the Quran. If you're in Israel, you turn to the Torah. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, whose book are we going to use? Even if we accept that this is a Christian nation, how many versions of the Bible are there? There's the Catholic version. Is the Catholic version the same as the Protestant version, which starts with really the King James version of the Bible? Is it really the same? What? Well, in the Catholic Bible, they threw out lots of stuff. They went through periodically in different Vatican councils and decided that they just didn't need this book or that book from the Old Testament. Threw it out. The New International Version. If you're Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you have not just the Bible, but the what? The Book of Mormon. We're going to use that book. Whose interpretation of the book are we going to use? So Kant comes up with another form of absolutism called rational absolutism. Now, for both types, they deny the importance of results. It doesn't matter what the results are in the Bible, if you turn to the Bible. It's just that you follow the laws. What are some of the laws in the Bible? Leviticus 18:22. If a man lies with another man as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. Their blood shall surely be upon them. So we should stone them. What's wrong with that? Well, if you look a few verses and a few verses above and below that, what else is an abomination? It's an abomination to eat a shrimp. It's an abomination in Leviticus to wear linen and wool together. It's an abomination to plant two crops in the same field. So Kant says what we need to do is we need to come up with an alternative way of doing this. And he comes up with the categorical imperative. Now, in his three critiques, his most famous works, the critique of practical knowledge, the critique of pure knowledge, and the metaphysics of morals, he gives us the formulation. Kant says there are two types of imperatives. The first type of imperative is what he calls a hypothetical imperative, in the critique of practical knowledge. Hypothetical imperatives exist because of a want, and they may or may not have moral import. Why are you sitting here in this classroom listening to me lecture you about Kant? Which, by the way, I've often thought that the perfect punishment for recalcitrant students who fall asleep in my class would be for me to force them to listen to me read the Critique of Pure Reason very slowly to you. I was forced to read it in my graduate work, and I should. If you think I'm boring, on one of my student evaluations, the student said, "You're not funny." Yeah, I am. If you think I'm not funny, let me read Kant to you, or Aristotle. Not Plato. He's kind of entertaining because it's written in a dialogue form. It's kind of like a play. So why are you listening to me lecture you about Kant when you would rather be out with your friends, having a beer, playing pool, or whatever it is your generation does? What?
Because UCO took all our money.
Because UCO took all of your money, so you're sitting here, you figure you might as well get your maximization of utility. Well, it's because for most of you, the reason you're here and the reason you're getting a degree in the College of Business, everybody in here for the most part, how many of you are College of Business majors? Almost everybody. Anybody not a College of Business major? We have a couple. What's your major?
Nutrition.
Why the hell?
And food management.
And food management. Okay. What's your major?
Strategic communications.
Strategic communications. You're from the land of hippy dippy across the parking lot. Or actually, to the south, that's the Tom's building over there, right? Who else is, What, most of you are business majors, and most of you are in here because you want, and even those of you who are in nutrition and strategic communication, you want a job, and you want skills. And that's why you're listening to me lecture you about Kant on a Thursday afternoon, or Thursday morning, almost afternoon, when you'd rather be doing something else. Because you want a job. So that's a hypothetical imperative. If you want to get a job, a good job, and it's not just a job, you want a better job than what you're going to get. With your strategic communications degree, you're going to be able to go out and say, I can do these things. I can do PR. I can do advertising. I have these skill sets that I can do. Whereas if you don't have a college degree, what are you going to be doing? Would you like fries with that? You're going to learn how to upsell the hard way. Apple pie with your meal, right? So if you want a better job, you should go to college. We know that by and large, on the whole, people with college degrees earn more over their lifetime than people without them. And business students particularly earn more. And sales students earn a lot. I am like Saul on the road to Damascus. I have seen the light. And this sales thing is, it's great. I try to convince everybody that you can be a salesperson. It's fundamentally you're going to sell. So that doesn't have a whole lot of moral import. If you want to get a good job, some people don't care about getting a good job. They just want to get along, do their thing, and that's not important to them. To make a lot of money. That has no moral import, really. It doesn't. If you want to make a lot of money or not, it has very little moral import. That's a hypothetical imperative. Categorical imperatives, on the other hand, exist because there is a moral import. We can ascertain, according to Kant, our duties a priori. Rather than relying on the book, which is going to tell us what our duties are, we can ascertain these through the rational mind. Without reference to experience, a priori is knowledge that's gained from the rational mind. An example of this is the Pythagorean Theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I suggested to you last time that Pythagoras didn't go around drawing triangles in the dirt in ancient Greece and come up with this theorem. He saw this with the mind's eye. Kant says we can do the same thing with ethics. So what is an ethical duty? Well, in every interaction with another rational being, you should act in such a way as to be able to will that your action would be a universal maxim of law. It has to be logically consistent. What does this mean? You can't start to say the categorical imperative, repeat it after a couple of glasses of wine, and not sort of begin to chuckle. I mean, it sounds good, but after you start to think about it, after a glass of vino or two, it has maybe some things that you think, oh, really? So what is it that you can never do? Because you have to treat a rational human being as an end in and of themselves, that's a human being, and not as a means to an end. Never lie. Never lie. Ever. Why? Why can you never lie according to Kant? This is a categorical imperative. Because when you lie, you're manipulating somebody for your own benefit. And you're treating that person as a means to an end rather than as an end in and of themselves. Let's think about a very simple example. When your insignificant other asks you, how do I look? And you look great. Knowing full well that they look like death warmed over in pastels. You're a winter robin, not a spring. You look like a ghost in that shade of pink. You look like a corpse, but you don't say that. Knowing that they do. Because why? Well, you're manipulating them. Why? Because if you say things like, you look like holy hell in that outfit, go back upstairs and change. Which is the reason I'm divorced. So I say things like that. You end up divorced. Brutal honesty. Kant would say, yeah, brutal honesty. Never lie. Well, what about a more difficult example? During World War II, lots of people, when the Nazis knocked on the door, where are the Jews? They lied. Kant would say you can't lie. But most of us would say that's too harsh, isn't it? Now again, this is a valid ethical theory. Why? Because it is universalizable. You never lie. You can apply that to all people at all places at all times. It's based on absolute reason. Why? Because you should never treat another individual as a means to an end, but as an end in and of themselves. But it does have this problem. It denies the importance of results, but it does have this problem. Never lie. Most of us say there are exceptions to the rules, right? For every rule there has to be some exceptions. Ultimately, I think if you ask Kant, why can you never lie? Well, if we all lie, there's a movie with Ricky Gervais that some of you probably have seen. Most of you probably haven't because it's not one of his better known works. It's called The Invention of Life. And I think this is why Kant would say that you can't lie. So in this movie, everybody's brutally honest. They do exactly what I was describing a minute ago. He's going out, for example, the movie opens with Ricky Gervais going out on a date. This girl is very attractive, and she's on the phone with, I think her mother is who's calling her, or maybe it's her friend. The question is, obviously, are you going to sleep with him? No, he's fat and dumpy and looks like an unmade bed, and I'm only going out on this date because I said I would. Brutal honesty. And at some point, Ricky Gervais is the first one in this movie to... Have any of you seen this movie? You've seen it. What happens?
He tells the first lie ever.
He tells the first lie ever. And it turns out great for him for a while, doesn't it? Like he goes into the bank and says, there should be $5 million in my bank account. And they're like, oh, well, there has to be a mistake. And they put in $5 million. And he goes to this girl on the street and says, if you don't sleep with me right now, the world is going to come to an end. But ultimately, what happens, it leads to all these problems. And I think that's what Kant would say, is that ultimately we can't lie, because when we treat people as means to an end, when we use them, it can lead to bad results. Ultimately, it leads to bad results. So isn't that a way of saying that results really do matter? But again, it's a valid ethical theory, even though it has problems. So there's a third, if we think about this in synthesis terms, there's a third theory. It starts with Aristotle and his two most famous works, the Nicomachean Ethics and the Eudemian Ethics. And what we see in Aristotle is it's a balance. Aristotle says what we have to do is, in order to ascertain what the good life is, we have to find out what the purpose of a human being is. And from there we can determine what kind of life we should live. So what is the purpose of a human being? Well, Aristotle says the purpose of a human being is you have to seek the terminus ad quem, the point at which it no longer makes sense to ask the question, why? You see me on the mall out here. We have two sort of malls at UCO. These broad walkways that we have between here and the administration building. And I'm walking back to my office in the administration building. Where are you going, Professor? Oh, I'm going to the doctor. Well, why are you going to the doctor? Well, because I have to have my annual physical. Why do you have to have an annual physical? Well, because I want to live. That's the terminus ad quem. People want to live. Doesn't matter, well, why do you want to live? Well, people do. What is the purpose of a human being? Aristotle comes up with the terminus ad quem. He says that the terminus ad quem is the eudaimonic life. Eudaimonia. How is this generally translated? Well, most people translate it as happiness, but I agree with Professor Daniel Robinson and Sir Anthony Kinney that a better translation of the eudaimonic life is a flourishing life. It's not happiness as in, drink up, let's have another round. It's the flourishing life. It's the balanced life. And you see this in all of Aristotle's works, that there's this balance. In the Politics, he talks about, in Republic, Plato and Socrates come up with what they think is the ideal. We know about Socrates from his most famous student, who wrote down what he said, Plato. Socrates didn't write anything down. He would never get tenure at a college campus today. We know about it from two sources, Plato and his friend and poet Xenophon wrote about Socrates. They come up with the ideal system. Aristotle looks at governments and he studies them and he says, look, there's not one ideal government. There are good governments and there are bad governments. There are good governments of one and bad governments of one, good governments of a few and good governments and bad governments of many. A good government of one he calls a monarchy. A bad government of one he calls a tyranny. A good government of a few he calls an aristocracy. A bad government of a few he calls an oligarchy. A good government of many is a polity, and the worst form of government of all, mob rule, is democracy. And he defines these. He says a good government is one that governs in the interest of the governed. A bad government is one that governs in the interest of the rulers. And of these types, he likes this one the best because he says it's the least likely to degenerate. Good governments of one start out as benevolent dictatorships, but absolute power can corrupt absolutely. Henry VIII started out as kind of an enlightened king in England. He was very human. He was trained in the humanist philosophy, and he was very interested in promoting it. And then he went spinning off the rails somewhere and started chopping off his wives' heads. Not such a great guy. Burning people at the stake. But he started out, but it's very easy to grab power and seize it and become bad. It's very easy for too many people to get involved and for it to degenerate into mob rule, where we're enslaving a minority of people so that the majority can have stuff like chocolate. But in this, you have a balance. Everything for Aristotle is about this balance. In friendship, it's about a balance. There are friendships based on utility. Nothing wrong with them, but when the utility is over, the friendship will end. There are friendships based on pleasure. Again, nothing wrong with those. These are your drinking buddies. But when you have to go to whiskey school, what's whiskey school? AA, the Betty Ford Clinic, right? They're going to tell you have to change your playgrounds and your playmates when you go to whiskey school. Can't go to the bar anymore. And those friends that you have at the bar are not going to be your friends anymore. It's going to end. And there's perfected. That's the middle ground. There's perfect friendship. Utility. Your friends at work are usually useful. And when you leave the job, you usually don't keep them. You make new friends at your new job. Well, you do this for a human being. What are the characteristic traits? Well, you have to discern what are bad characteristics and look at extremes. So what's a bad characteristic? Well, cowardice. What's the opposite of cowardice? Well, it's the person who will fight. Heedlessness. They're willing to fight in every battle. What's the middle ground? Courage. The courageous person knows when to fight the good fight. Now, so you come up with these virtues. Now, what are the criticisms of virtue ethics? But it's one that I think we should really consider. The criticisms of virtue ethics are, how do we determine what the end of a human being is? I think Aristotle comes up with a very good definition. But you could argue about that. Some people would say that following a deity may be the end of a human being. Even if we can determine what the end of a human being is, how do we determine the virtues? I think Aristotle has a pretty good solution for that. And then finally, the last criticism is, even if we can ascertain the first two, can we teach it? Does anybody think, for example, that we could have changed Ken Lay, who was the CEO of Enron when it lost billions of dollars for investors and was the largest financial debacle to date at that point in time, was chair. He was the CEO and chairman, was a guy who had a PhD from Texas A&M named Ken Lay. You would have thought that he'd had a class in ethics along the way in getting a PhD, and yet he was so greedy that they engaged in all these financial irregularities that ultimately led to investors being swindled out of millions and billions of dollars. And do we think we could have changed that? Well, in response to that, I think we can look at, there is at least one example that we know of well that did this, Benjamin Franklin. And I'll try to blow this up so that you can see it. Franklin starts out as a very poor person. His father was a tradesman, not a very successful tradesman. And Franklin was apprenticed to a brother at an early age who was somewhat harsh on him. But he noticed he had certain skills, certain leadership qualities, and he became one of our favorite founding fathers. He's the only founding father, by the way, that we know of by his nickname, Ben Franklin. We call him Ben Franklin, not Benjamin. You don't say Tom Jefferson or George E. Washington. He rose from very humble beginnings to be one of the most successful people in the Americas, a prolific businessman, an inventor, statesman, philosopher. And he did this. He came up with 13 virtues. He did this means between extremes thing. Why did he come up with 13? Well, if you multiply 13 times 4, what do you get? 52. How many weeks are there in a year? 52. So you can go through 4 complete cycles in a year. And he put them down on a piece of ivory. And he noticed if he put a spot there, he knew he had more work to do. But he did practiced these, and he became his own sociological experiment, and it worked. Temperance, eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Silence, speak not what benefits others or yourself, avoid trifling conversation. I think we should think about that in the modern age, as we engage in gossip far too frequently. Order, let all things have their place, let each part of your business have its time. Resolution, resolve to perform what you ought, perform without fail what you resolve. Frugality, make no expense but do good to others or yourself, waste nothing. Industry, lose no time, be always employed in something useful, cut off unnecessary actions. Sincerity, use no deceit, think innocently and justly, speak accordingly. Justice, wrong done by doing injuries, omitting the benefits that are your duty. Moderation, avoid extremes. I think these are things that we should think about. He became very, very good. He said, he was fond of the phrase, honesty is the best policy. We focus on the word honesty. He focused on the word policy. It pays off well to be an honest businessman. It pays good dividends. And we see that in something called customer lifetime value. If you swindle people and you lie to them, they're not likely to treat you. You might get them once, but they're not likely to come back and do business with you again. So let's talk a little bit about marketing research. If there are any questions on ethics, and we'll watch, if I have enough time, hopefully, we'll watch a marketing research video that integrates ethics and marketing research. So, marketing research. Why should we engage in marketing research? Well, 95% of businesses will fail within the first 5 years, and why is that? Because they project, and a lot of people do, on others what they desire in themselves, and they don't do marketing research. Just because I think that QB dolls are the best thing since sliced bread doesn't mean that everybody's going to think that. And a lot of businesses fail to engage in sophisticated marketing research, and they fail. Lots of products, even by successful companies, fail because, again, maybe they shortcut the marketing research. They don't do their due diligence. So it's based on the scientific method, and we can study consumers from a scientific perspective. Aristotle really, I think, if you look at a lot of literature, it says it was developed in the 17th century. I think Aristotle was pretty scientific even before then, but certainly by the 17th century, that's when we really see the scientific method coming into its own. So it's based on empirical observation of testable hypotheses. So what makes something scientific? Well, it should be repeatable, testable, and empirically falsifiable. Karl Popper's theory of the null hypothesis. In science, we always have to be aware of the null hypothesis. We start out with a hypothesis in business, very simple one. All people like to buy. Well, if we find somebody who doesn't really like to shop, well, we've falsified that, right? Find one person, I just can't stand to shop. We have the null hypothesis, so we have to be aware of that. So here's the scientific method. A lot of times they say it starts with a hypothesis, but before that, what do you have to have? Before you form a hypothesis, you start out with this idea that all people like to buy. Well, what led to that hypothesis? Well, you observe people in the marketplace going out and doing what? Buying stuff. We like stuff. We build monuments to our stuff. It's called our house, isn't it? And when we fill that monument to our stuff up, does anybody need a 5-bedroom, 4-bath, 5,000 square foot McMansion in a gated community, like everybody who's shallow and pretentious in Edmond, in an urban assault vehicle, Ford or a Lincoln Navigator or Ford Explorer or whatever. So we like to buy. We built stuff, monuments to our stuff. It's called our house. So we observe this. So we think about questions. Can we predict what people will want to buy? Modify and formulate hypotheses. Test them by gathering data to look at these. Can we predict whether or not something will be successful? Well, how are we going to? Well, we can do surveys and ask people if they want it, if they need it, they would be interested in buying it. If we find that they don't, we need to refine or alter or expand or reject our hypotheses, then test them again, and then try to develop theories. Are there law-like theories in marketing that we can develop? Well, I think pretty good evidence suggests that people do like to buy. It's one of the reasons that capitalism has been overwhelmingly more successful than communism, because people do like what? They like their stuff. It's an expression of our individuality. And of course, this again then leads to more questions or observations, and the cycle continues. So marketing research is the process of defining problems and opportunities, systematically collecting and analyzing data or information, making recommendations based on that data. It does no good to do marketing research and then do what? Just throw it in a drawer and let it sit there and do nothing. So what do we ultimately want from marketing research? Well, we want to be able to take action and do marketing plans and refine those based on marketing research. So it's a continual process. The challenges that we face in doing this, it's really one of the things that you hear people say a lot is, well, marketing's not like rocket science. And that's right, it's not. It's a lot harder. Rocket science operates within very well-known laws of what? Physics. We know with absolute certainty if we can launch something into space. And if our missile doesn't go like what's happening in North Korea, what will they do? They'll refine it and retest it, and we know that we can do this, right? It's more difficult when you talk about people, because the reason that people buy or want things can be enormously complex. It's not well defined within this law of physics. There are lots of things that influence, and so finding the knowledge can be very difficult in doing marketing research. So we have issues of knowledge, asking questions, and I give you an example here. Rigidly codifying, this is from a widely used scientific instrument in the field of ethics and marketing research called the EPQ. Rigidly codifying an ethical position that prevents certain types of actions could stand in the way of better human relations and adjustment. What's wrong with this question? Well, it's what we call, and it's used a lot. Again, the EPQ is a standard instrument that we use in a lot of fields, not just in marketing ethics, but in a lot of fields, to test whether or not people are subjectivists or absolutists, if they have high ideals or if they're more pessimistic. And what's wrong with this? Well, it's actually a double-barreled question. Human relations and adjustment are not the same thing, are they? You could be well-adjusted and not have good relations. If you're happy with yourself, you may not be suffering from any psychoses, but you just may not be a terribly social person. Human relations deals with sociability. Adjustment deals with what? Your sort of internal psychological makeup. So it's a double-barreled question. We also see issues of social desirability bias. So for example, in marketing research, we ask questions like, how often do you brush your teeth? Most people are going to tell you you've been trained by going to the dentist twice a year, every 6 months, and seeing all the billboards and signs and commercials that you're supposed to do what? It's 2 by 2. What does that mean? You're supposed to brush your teeth what? Twice a day and for 2 minutes. Everybody gets this, right? And everybody's going to tell you whether or not they're going to tell you yes. If you ask them, do you floss? They're going to say what? Yes. Overwhelmingly, we know that what you don't do though. Most people don't floss. They don't. By the way, they've taken it off as one of the recommendations of the National Institute of Health has taken it off. They've said that there's very little evidence that flossing actually works. In spite of that, I'm one of those that's a flosser. I like to floss, so I'm still going to do it. Oftentimes there are different disconnections in marketing between desires and the actual actions. A lot of times we project what we want to do, and we think that we do, but we don't necessarily do it all the time. If you ask people, for example, how often they change their sheets, they're going to tell you what? They project as again, we know that you should wash your sheets at least once a week, change your bed at least once a week to avoid what? The buildup of dander and all kinds of bad things in pillows and mattresses. So they think that they do that, but maybe they don't. There can be a multitude of reasons. So we start with defining the problem. Based on our observations, we're going to set research objectives. What should they be? Well, they should be specific. We're going to have to go beyond just people like to buy to what? What would be a more specific recommendation? Do people want to buy a hybrid car? Or do people want to buy bubblegum flavored toothpaste? And it should be measurable. We have three basic types of research. There's exploratory. This is where we have some observations, but maybe we haven't really fully fleshed out what it is that we want. And we're going to maybe do qualitative research to figure out further what we're going to want, things like focus groups. Descriptive research, how often does this occur? Things like the Census Bureau are descriptive statistics. So we know, for example, what? What do we know about Edmond from Census Bureau data? It's what?
Highly populated in a small area.
It's a highly populated as opposed to Guthrie in a smaller area. It's got a higher concentration. What else do we know about Edmond from Census Bureau data? Frequency. It's growing rapidly, and it's got what? Higher income than a lot of other areas in the state. And then causal, determining how a change in one factor influences others. And then we want to find what specific actions will be measures of success. If we launch a product, if we're doing marketing research on a product, what's going to be ultimately successful? And that's not a trivial question. Do we just want to break even? Probably not. But how much profit do we want to make? Then we're going to develop a research plan, identify constraints or limitations. You should always be aware of limitations. You can't test everything, can you? So you're going to have to limit it. What are we going to need? Are we going to need qualitative versus quantitative? What's an advantage of qualitative data? Well, qualitative data is enormously rich, but it may not be generalizable to a larger population. So if we look at things like consumer ethnography, how consumers actually do use products, we can get a lot of rich data on that, but the way one person uses the product may be radically different than the way another. I use my iPhone a lot for what? Controlling that camera. How many of you use it? I mean, I use this for 3 hours a day to control a camera. How many of you use it that way? So if you study me, you might say, well, people use it to control their cameras. How many of you have actually done that? Probably no one else in here. You've used it once to do that, or how often? A lot? Okay, a few times, not a lot. So that's rich data that you can get, but it may not be universalizable to a population. We have to define the population or the universe. So what is a population in statistics? For those of you who've had stats, and you should have, this should come dripping off your tongue. What is the population? Okay, sample size is a subset of the population. What's that? Okay, that's population, that's pretty close. Population, you'll get 5 points for today. A population is a well-defined collection of units. A well-defined, or a universe is a well-defined collection of units. How are we going to go about doing that? There are things like convenience samples. Those may not be terribly helpful. What are convenience samples? Just asking people, that are here. For example, in a lot of research that we do, we use students, and I'm very critical of that because students are not good examples of what? Anything other than students. We use a lot of students in research, and we try to project that out, and students are not a very good example of anything other than students. But we use that a lot, so that's a convenience sample. As opposed to a what? What's a scientific sample? An absolute random sample. What's a random sample? One in which every unit of the population as it's defined has a what? Statistically equal chance of being in the sample. What's a stratified sample? Why would we might want to do that? Well, a stratified sample says you want a certain number of, so for example, if we say that 15% of the population of Edmond is non-Caucasian, we may want to stratify the sample so that we get a representative number. If you had an absolute random sample, what could happen? You could end up with, from the randomization, all Caucasians, and you might want to test also African Americans or Hispanic populations, so you can stratify the sample. Then getting participation, you can have problems with deviant responders. People will tell you what they think you want to hear, or just to get through the sample or through the research, they might answer things incorrectly, just to try and click through that as quickly as they can. On surveys, we find a lot of that. And there are ways that you can deal with deviant responders. We've developed a method, a colleague of mine and I have developed a method of dealing with determining whether or not somebody is a deviant responder based on a pattern of responses in their surveys. Gather the data. Are we going to use secondary data that's already collected? The Census Bureau, for example, is a great source of already collected. There are limitations to secondary data, and that it's not specific to a specific project, and that can be limiting. Primary data is collected for the specific project. In terms of qualitative, we can do in-depth interviews, focus groups, or consumer ethnography. Consumer ethnography is where you actually go in and you watch how people use products. You might get them to allow you to put cameras, for example, in their home. There's a guy who does a lot of this. He actually gets into people's showers and watches how they use various types of products. Of course, there are ethical considerations in that. Quantitative, we usually use closed-ended, empirical type questions. What's an advantage of quantitative? You can model it. You can get statistical models that you can't get from qualitative necessarily, but it limits. If you ask people, how many times did you buy X? It doesn't tell you why they bought it, just how they bought it, right? So there's a limitation there. We need to use the appropriate methods. A lot of times you'll find people not using the appropriate method or the appropriate technique, and I use two that are popular in marketing or ANOVA, analysis of variance, and regression. We use regression a lot in just-in-time inventory modeling. Then you present your findings. These should be, in presenting your findings for marketing research, they should be direct. I wrote a paper one time and it came back from the reviewers and they said, this should not read like a mystery novel. And I think that's good advice. You should be direct about your findings, not make it a mystery. They should be understandable. In marketing, we've gotten really good at this, using marketing dashboards, which you talked about in your text, as graphic displays of data so that we can figure out where we're going, where we need to improve in a nice way, and using the rule of parsimony, be brief and to the point. Don't claim more than you can actually prove. So you make recommendations, you should implement those based on your marketing research, and then you need to continually, just like the scientific process suggests, evaluate based on the feedback that you're getting and take appropriate actions. You shouldn't just continue to do things the same way over and over again. If your research is bad, you need to go figure out what's wrong with it. The definition of insanity is what? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So you need to evaluate that and figure out where you went wrong if something is not occurring the way you think it should, and make appropriate corrections. I don't really have time. The video takes about 25 minutes. It's Alessandro, if you're interested in it, it will not be on the test. It's Alessandro's TED Talk on why privacy matters, and he talks a lot about marketing research in there. You can Google that if you want. You can send me an email and I'll give you the link to it. So be sure to come up and get your points for today. I will see you on Tuesday for the first exam. We are caught up. I'm like Sherman marching to a grand. Thank you.